Breaking news as we came on the air. I want to read you this X post from Caroline Levitt on the president leaving the G7 summit early and get your response. Quote, President Trump had a great day at the G7, even signing a major trade deal with the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. We can get to that in a moment. Much was accomplished, but because of what is going on in the Middle East, President Trump will be leaving tonight after dinner with heads of state. Take that as you will, your response to the president choosing to leave early.
Well, look, frankly, the president has traveling with him the ability to stay in touch with our armed forces and to stay on top of any situation in the world. I hate to say it, but my gut hunch is this was a party at which he wasn't especially welcome. He has picked fights with every one of our major allies represented at this summit. His chaotic and ill-conceived tariff fights with our partners and allies may well have meant some very awkward and difficult conversations. I hope that he is coming back for a constructive reason, but I'm alarmed, given some of his recent tweets, that this might be the next step in spiraling towards getting involved in a major war in the Middle East.
I was confused about this announcement from Caroline Levitt, and for a couple reasons. One, if you're going to announce that your principal is leaving the G7, you gotta put a little more around it. This has inspired more questions and it's given answers. But two, to cite the Middle East in this, part of on the agenda for the G7 was the crisis in the Middle East.
Right. The
G7 members have a stake in what is going on. They want to contain the conflict, and I dovetail that with the fact that over the years the G7 has expanded to instead of just coordination about the economy, now it's broader world crises. The war in Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine was on the list. Why leave if that is the reason? Because the president got a skiff at his hotel, let me tell you. That's how it works, folks, okay? There's a skiff at the hotel. He can have his meeting.
So President Trump and Secretary Hegseth are spectacularly ill-prepared and unqualified to deal with this exact moment, which it pains me to say, but is the reality. And if you're about to face a major challenge in terms of our national security and the future of the Middle East, and you are still facing a challenge that President Trump hasn't stood up to of how to deal with Russia's aggression in Ukraine, my core values and my gut instinct, you want your partners and allies around a table with you, pulling in the same direction, seeing these things the same way, using their resources and their capacities alongside us. That's not his gut instinct. His is the exact opposite. He sees America first as America alone. And he doesn't see the value in having our NATO partners and allies, our EU partners, those who are at this table sitting with us, jointly figuring out how we're going to deal with the chaotic and uncertain moment we have in the Middle East and with the very real challenges of Russia's continued aggression. And I'll remind you, these two are connected. Russia's constant bombardment of civilians in Ukraine is facilitated by Iranian drones. Our critical competitors and opponents around the world, our enemies, the DPRK, North Korea, the PRC, Russia, and Iran are increasingly coordinating, sharing troops and equipment and material and strategy. And we don't see a strategy out of the White House for how to deal with it. And I don't think we're prepared for a full-scale conflict in the Middle East. He may have gone home to think about that, but I think he's leaving exactly the folks he should be consulting and working with to be prepared to deal with it.
I think y'all are so nice. Y'all just I swear the two of you it was just such a nice.
I'm sorry, we still live on Earth One. I guess.
Just very nice. No, look, Senator, I agree with that. But here's the other side of the coin you just put on the table. If you watched what happened with the Prime Minister today in Canada and how that conversation went with the president, you understand why this communique is coming out this evening that he's leaving early, because he did not like how that went down. He was put in his place, and he was one among many equals.
Yes.
And he doesn't like that. He right now thinks he's driving every conversation around the globe. And what he's realized in that moment is that these other partners that you just rightly laid up also have a say in this moment, whether it's economics or, as Simone noted, the broadening into the foreign policy space. How then do your colleagues deal with this childish behavior from a sitting president who can't stay in the room long enough to actually make the case, whatever that case is, but rather is peeved because he's not the center of attention, or that he is corrected by his peers because of his brutish behavior in other scenarios. How do your colleagues, I don't care, Republican or Democrat, majority or minority, frame this at this time, given everything that we see unfolding in the Middle East?
Too many of my Republican colleagues, not all of them, but too many of my Republican colleagues, since Trump became president in January, when he says outlandish things like Canada should be the 51st state, I'm going to invade and take part of Denmark, Greenland, we're going to retake the Panama, like nothing happened, like he didn't say that, because it's so nuts.
Right.
The very core of NATO would be shredded by our actually trying to take Greenland.
Right.
And it makes absolutely no sense. So mostly they've said, don't pay attention to what he says, pay attention to what he does. And then on some of the key issues, I'm going to bring your costs down, not up. He does things with his tariff wars with everybody that have caused just huge, incoherent, roiling the markets. Anyone who's got a 401k or who cares about their savings or is worried about the markets has been on a roller coaster ride. He caused so much unpredictability and chaos in our international relations in his first 2 months that he has switched to immigration enforcement and being aggressive and forceful about it, just to change the subject.
Right.
So that we're not talking about what's about to happen in the U.S. Senate, which is a bill, a Republican-only bill that will throw 16 million Americans off of health care and is taking food from hungry children and health care from seniors and disabled Americans to pay for a tax cut for billionaires. And the last thing that was happening before this Alex Padilla incident was the Elon Musk-Donald Trump fight, where Elon was denouncing the bill as a budget buster. Now, we just saw this evening what the Senate Republican Finance Committee is going to do, raise the debt limit by $5 trillion. An admission that this is a deficit explosion coming as a result of the bill they are trying to push through this week. It is immoral, it is cruel, and it is financially disastrous. And just last week, we had hundreds of faith leaders from across our country come to the steps of the Capitol to witness to the immorality of taking, I don't know of any faith that teaches that the right way to deal with the hungry, the seniors, the disabled, the children in our country is to take health care and food away from them to pay for a tax cut.
Senator?
Originally 6 and then 8 and then Russia was kicked out and now it's 7. It's long been about these Western advanced democracies that agree on democracy and values, and they have a lot more in common, and they sort of ally with each other to ally against other countries such as China. And it really strikes me that in our descriptions of this, as we look at what's going on, they are now riven by more contradictions than they are by similarities. And in many senses, you've got to wonder if the G7 can agree on anything at all, whether they can come up with a communique that, you know, is unified on Iran and Israel, whether trade comes up. And again, this is the United States that has bilateral problems with every other country, but all the other attendees don't have problems with each other. So this really is a G7 of contradictions. And the last time Trump went to Canada for a G7, he left early and derailed the entire thing. I think it would be a success if that doesn't happen this time.
As long as he just stays for the whole thing. It reminds me of, well, I'm not going to say it, but Thanksgivings with some of my family when I was growing up. Let me ask you about something Donald Trump said regarding when it used to be the G8. Let's listen.
The G7 used to be the G8. Barack Obama and a person named Trudeau didn't want to have Russia in. And I would say that that was a mistake, because I think you wouldn't have a war right now if you had Russia in. And you wouldn't have a war right now if Trump were president 4 years ago. I don't even consider him, he wasn't really an enemy at that time. There was no concept. If I were president, this war would have never happened. But likewise, if he were a member of what was called the G8 at that time, it was always the G8, you wouldn't have a war right now.
Trudeau wasn't prime minister. Russia was kicked out of the G8 in 2014. Yamiche, I saw you did a good fact check on that a little bit earlier. I wonder, given the way Donald Trump speaks about it, though, do you foresee him, Ravi, maybe at one point saying he doesn't want to be a part of it any longer, and he tries to go and create his own version of it, the G3 maybe, or G4 with Russia, Saudi Arabia, and China, maybe G5 with India?
It's quite possible. Look, alliances come and go. So we should by no means imagine that these are static alliances. They've always been dynamic, and so it shall be. But I think he fundamentally misunderstands why the G7 exists. I mean, that sound you were just playing, the G7 at the 8 at the time decided unanimously that they didn't want Russia to be a part of it because it had invaded Crimea. And Trump's trying to have it both ways there when he's saying that the G7 shouldn't have been tough on Russia. It was. But then that if he was president, Russia wouldn't have invaded the rest of Ukraine. And that sort of is a discordant message because either you're tough or you're not. And they were tough and it still happened. So I think, again, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of why this alliance exists. And your viewers will remember Biden leaned heavily into the G7 because it sort of became the place where he wanted to talk about democracy and alliances and brought in Japan, South Korea, others much closer into the fold. There are other countries that have been invited, by the way, India, South Africa, Ukraine is there. And this is all to bring them into this alliance of like-minded nations. Trump, however, also said today that he thinks China should be invited. So really just utterly discordant, utterly mixes up the messages. And really, it seems like he does want his own G3, as you put it.
Donald he's running away because this has failed for him. He is out the door quickly because it's failed miserably. And remember, Donald can't just come and go willy-nilly to Canada. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but because he's a convicted felon, I believe he's banned from the country and can come in with special permission. Like the Canadian government basically says that if you're a convicted felon, you're not just allowed to come in with a standard passport. Like, for example, you can come into Canada from the United States because it's not a visa country. Like any one of you from the United States could come to Canada. If you have your passport, you could come, whether it's by car, train, bus, plane, whatever. You could come into the country. If you had a conviction on your name, though, you probably won't be allowed in, even if that conviction's quite old. You see people get banned at the border all the time, and they basically say, well, sir, you have this on your record, and we're not letting you in. Generally, you need to have it either expunged from your record and officially pardoned and all of that, or write to the government in advance, write to the government in the border security and to the ministry and the government department in charge and say, hey, look, I'm an American. I have this on my record, but it was like 15 years ago and it wasn't violent. And since then, I've been a model citizen. Can I please get express permission to come in and waive my ban, at least temporarily? And they might say yes or no. Now, with Trump, they probably would say yes again, but at least in a formal sense, he's banned again. So he came for a couple days, but there's no guarantee Trump will be allowed back in, at least by the letter of the law. Now, Carney's been far too weak on Trump, so he might let him in. But Donald, I wouldn't take a visit to Canada for granted.